That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over the vast expanse of Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the training fields where the 82nd Airborne's K-9 unit assembled at dawn. Sergeant Elias Kane stood at attention, his boots planted firmly in the dew-kissed grass, the faint scent of damp earth rising around him. His uniform, starched and pressed, bore the insignia of a handler with 8 years in the unit. Clean lines, no frills, just the quiet authority earned through countless patrols. Beside him, Rex, his German shepherd partner, sat rigid, ears perked, black fur gleaming under the first light. The dog's breath came steady, a soft rhythm that matched the distant hum of idling Humvees. "Unit, form up!" barked Captain Harlan Reed, the unit commander, his voice cutting through the crisp air like a blade. Reed was a lifer, broad-shouldered and unyielding, with a jaw set from years of deployments in the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan. His eyes scanned the line of handlers and their dogs, 15 pairs in total, a mix of Malinois and shepherds, each animal vetted for explosive detection and patrol work. The handlers snapped to position, salutes crisp, the metallic click of dog tags echoing faintly. This was routine, a certification drill to recertify the unit before rotation stateside. No one questioned the order of things here. Chain of command was the spine of the operation, unbendable. Elias adjusted his grip on Rex's leash, the worn leather warm from his palm. They'd been paired since Rex was a pup, imported from a breeder in the Netherlands, trained in the biting cold of North Carolina winters. The bond wasn't spoken of in the barracks. It showed in the silences, the way Rex would lean into Elias during briefings, sensing the subtle tension in his handler's shoulders. Elias had lost count of the missions where Rex's nose had saved lives, sniffing out IEDs buried in sun-baked roads, alerting to insurgents hidden in compound walls. In the field, Rex was extension of Elias. Loyalty forged in the dust and fear of war zones. Back home, Elias's wife Maria would joke that Rex was the third member of their family, but Elias knew better. Rex was the brother he never had, the one who never judged the nightmares that woke him at 300. The drill commenced with precision. Handlers led their dogs through mock perimeters, simulating urban clears. Commands rang out, "Such, im for search, aus, for release." Rex moved like a shadow at Elias's heel, his paws silent on the packed dirt, nostrils flaring as he quartered the ground. The air carried the tang of gun oil from nearby ranges, mingled with the sharper bite of simulated explosive scents planted by instructors. Elias's focus narrowed to the task. Watch the dog's body language, the subtle twitch of tail or freeze of stance. A false alert could mean recertification failure. Worse, it eroded trust in the field. Halfway through, Captain Reed called a halt for evaluation. The unit regrouped near the kennel block, a squat row of concrete buildings with chain-link runs. Handlers wiped sweat from brows, offering water bowls to their partners. Rex lapped steadily, his brown eyes lifting to meet Elias's in that knowing glance. "Good boy," Elias murmured, scratching behind the ears, a rare softness amid the discipline. Reed paced the line, clipboard in hand. "Kane, your run was solid." Rex held point without hesitation. A nod of approval, brief but valued. Elias saluted, chest tightening with the quiet pride of competence. But as the captain moved on, a murmur rippled through the ranks. Private Lawson, a young handler fresh from basic, had botched his drill. His Belgian Malinois shadow had alerted prematurely on a decoy, drawing a sharp reprimand. "Lawson, what the hell was that?" Reed's voice rose, echoing off the kennel walls. The private stood frozen, face paling under the scrutiny of the unit. "Sir, Shadow just—" "Excuses don't save lives," Reed cut in, his tone steel. "You think insurgents wait for perfect conditions? Recheck your fundamentals or you're off rotation." Lawson's shoulders slumped, but it was the undercurrent that Elias caught. The way some handlers exchanged glances, the faint smirk from Sergeant Mills across the line. Mills, with his 5 years under his belt, had a reputation for cutting corners, whispering doubts about overtrained mutts during downtime. It was the kind of talk that festered in units, testing loyalties without a shot fired. Elias ignored it, focusing on Rex. But as the unit dismissed for chow, Reed pulled him aside near the equipment shed. The captain's face was grim, lines etched deeper by the morning light. "Kane, word from higher. Rotations approved, but there's a catch. Brass wants efficiencies, fewer dogs stateside. Rex's age is catching up. He's pushing 9. Might need to phase him out post-mission." Elias's stomach knotted, the words landing like a gut punch. Phase out. It meant retirement papers, a quiet handover to a civilian life, maybe a farm if they were lucky. But Elias knew the reality. Surplus dogs often ended up in shelters, forgotten amid bureaucracy. Rex had given everything. Burying him in some paperwork limbo felt like betrayal. "Sir, Rex is still sharp. His alerts are textbook." Reed's eyes softened fractionally, a rare crack in the armor. "I know, Sergeant, but orders are orders. Chain of command doesn't bend for sentiment." He clapped Elias's shoulder, the gesture formal, then walked away, boots crunching gravel. The day dragged on with administrative briefs, logistics for the upcoming deployment to a stabilization op in the Middle East. Elias sat in the briefing tent, the canvas walls fluttering in the breeze, radio static crackling from the comms table. Rex lay at his feet, head on paws, oblivious to the undercurrents. But Elias felt it, the weight of decision pressing in. Duty demanded he prepare for the mission, train the unit, follow the path laid out. Yet conscience whispered of the bond that had carried him through ambushes and endless watches. What did loyalty mean if it ended in abandonment? By evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the fields in amber, Elias walked Rex through the perimeter trail. The dog's gait was steady, tail wagging low, the desert-like scrub of North Carolina whispering against their legs. Elias's mind raced. Protocol said report to vet services, sign the forms. But defying that, even quietly, could mark his record, ripple through the chain. A single act born of conscience against the rigid order of military life. In the distance, the call to quarters sounded, a bugle note carrying on the wind. Elias knelt, meeting Rex's gaze. "We're in this together, boy," he said, voice low. The dog's head tilted, sensing the shift. That night, sleep evaded Elias, the hum of base life a distant drone. The test had begun, not in the field, but in the quiet spaces where orders clashed with the heart of a handler. The deployment orders came down 2 weeks later, crisp and unyielding, delivered via encrypted dispatch to the unit's secure terminal. Elias Kane stood in the ops center, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like persistent insects, casting stark shadows on the maps pinned to the walls. The air smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, the kind that clung to uniforms long after briefings. Rex waited outside the door, tethered to a post, his nose twitching at the scents filtering through the cracks, ink, sweat, the faint metallic tang of anxiety from the handlers milling about. "Stabilization op in the Syrian border region," Captain Reed announced, his pointer tracing the jagged line on the digital display. 2 months max, IED sweeps, perimeter security for the aid convoys, K9 teams lead the clears. The room nodded in unison, chairs scraping faintly as officers leaned forward. Elias's eyes fixed on the coordinates, arid badlands, wadis choked with dust, the same terrain where Rex had once frozen mid-stride, alerting to a buried pressure plate that saved a platoon. No drama in the memory, just the dog's low growl, the handler's steady hand on the leash, and the quiet evacuation that followed. Post-briefing, Elias signed for his gear, reinforced vests for both him and Rex, the dog's custom harness with its embedded GPS tracker. The vet tech, a wiry specialist named Corporal Diaz, ran the final health check in the kennel bay. Rex stood patiently on the exam table, tail thumping softly against the stainless steel as Diaz probed joints and gums. "He's solid, Sergeant. Joints are holding. No arthritis flare. But at 9, heat's his enemy out there. Monitor hydration." Elias nodded, clipping the ID tags back onto Rex's collar, the worn leather band etched with service numbers, a faint patina from years of sand and salt. "Appreciate it, Corporal." Diaz paused, glancing at the retirement memo clipped to the file. "Heard about the phase-out? Brass-cutting budgets again." Elias's jaw tightened, but he kept his response neutral. "Just following protocol." Protocol. The word echoed in his mind like a mantra, a shield against the knot in his chest. Rex's eyes met his, steady and unblinking, as if the dog understood the unspoken weight. The unit shipped out at 0400, the rumble of C-130s vibrating through the tarmac at Pope Field. Elias loaded Rex into the crate last, the dog's paws padding softly on the grated floor before settling with a sigh. The flight was a haze of turbulence and dimmed lights, handlers dozing against bulkheads, dogs whining faintly in their holds. Elias stared out the small window, the Atlantic blurring below, his thoughts drifting to Maria's last call. "Bring him home safe, Elias, both of you." Loyalty, she meant, not just to the mission, but to the bond that had anchored him through the isolation of forward operating bases. They touched down in the Jordan Valley staging area by dusk, the heat slamming into them like a wall as the ramp dropped. Dust devils swirled across the airstrip, coating tongues with grit. The temporary base was a cluster of tents and razor wire, Humvees idling under camouflage netting. Elias uncrated Rex, the dog's ears flattening against the roar of rotors, but his stance was alert, nostrils flaring at the new palette of scents. Diesel fumes, sun-baked earth, the acrid hint of distant ordnance. First patrol launched at dawn the next day. Elias's team, 4 handlers, 8 soldiers, cleared a supply route toward the border. The convoy rolled slow, tires crunching over gravel, radios crackling with position checks. "Kane, take point with Rex," came the order from Lieutenant Vargas, the platoon lead, his voice steady over the static. Elias affirmed, dismounting with Rex at heel. The dog moved methodically, quartering the roadside berms, his harness bells silenced for stealth. Elias scanned the horizon. Low scrub. Heat mirages dancing off rocks, the sun climbing relentless. An hour in, Rex stiffened, a low chuff escaping his throat. Elias signaled halt, hand raised flat. The convoy braked, engines idling to a murmur. Rex pulled toward a shallow ditch, nose down, body rigid. Elias followed, heart rate steady from training, but the air felt thicker here, charged, like the pause before a sandstorm. "Positive alert," he reported into the radio, voice clipped. The EOD tech swept in, probe beeping confirmation, an old anti-vehicle mine, half buried from some forgotten skirmish. Diffused without incident, the team pressed on, but Elias caught Vargas's approving nod. "Good work, Kane. Rex is earning his keep." Back at base that evening, as the team debriefed under the mess tent's glow, lanterns flickering against canvas, Captain Reed pulled Elias aside again. The captain's face was shadowed, a field tablet in hand. Higher-ups radioed in, rotations extending, instabilities spiking, and on the dog front. Vet assessment came back. Rex's cumulative exposure, heat stress from past tours, flags him for immediate retirement upon return. No exceptions. The words landed heavy, the tent flap whipping in a gust that carried the scent of cooling sand. Elias's grip tightened on his canteen, the plastic creaking. "Sir, he's performing. Saved us today." Reed's expression held no give, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I get it. Sergeant, but chain of command prioritizes unit readiness. Phase him out clean. Stateside paperwork will handle placement. Placement. Elias knew the euphemism. Auctions to law enforcement, if lucky, or the slow fade into civilian limbo. Rex, who had shouldered the weight of war beside him, reduced to a line item. That night Elias walked the perimeter fence alone, Rex padding silently at his side. The stars wheeled overhead, sharp in the desert clarity, the distant howl of a jackal cutting the quiet. He knelt by a cluster of rocks, running a hand along Rex's flank, feeling the steady rise and fall of ribs. The dog's head rested against his knee, warm breath stirring the dust. Duty pulled one way, complete the op, sign the forms, trust the system that had forged them both. But conscience tugged harder, a quiet defiance blooming in the silence. What price for loyalty if it meant leaving a partner to fade? In the handler's tent, as the bass settled into the rhythm of generators humming low, Elias lay awake on his cot. The decision simmered, unspoken, the weight of it pressing like the desert night. Orders were the foundation, but bonds like theirs, forged in the fire of alerts and evacuations, demanded more. The test deepened, not in the flash of a patrol, but in the shadowed choices that could redefine a handler's code. The patrols intensified over the following weeks, the Syrian border a jagged scar under relentless skies. Elias Kane's team pushed deeper into the wadis, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched thyme and the metallic bite of spent brass from old battlefields. Rex moved with the same unerring focus, his paws kicking up faint puffs of dust as he quartered the rocky outcrops. Elias kept his commands minimal, sharp whistles, a light tug on the leash, the bond between them, a silent language honed over years of shared vigilance. The unit's rhythm held steady, dawn briefs in the command tent, where Captain Reed outlined routes on weathered maps, his voice a low anchor amid the crackle of satellite feeds. K9 leads, infantry covers flanks, no deviations. But the retirement order gnawed at Elias like a persistent itch beneath his vest. Each alert Rex made, sniffing out a cache of abandoned munitions in a goat trail, or freezing at the edge of a tampered culvert, sharpened the conflict. The dog was irreplaceable, his nose a lifeline in terrain where human eyes failed. Yet protocol loomed. Upon rotation home, Rex would be sidelined, his service reduced to a vet exam and a form stamped for surplus. Elias had seen it before. Handlers returning to empty kennels, their partners auctioned off or euthanized quietly if bids fell short. The chain of command justified it as resource management, but to Elias it felt like erasure, a betrayal of the loyalty that had pulled him through the blackout nights of Kandahar. One afternoon, as the convoy snaked through a narrow defile, the radio spat urgency. "Contact ahead. Possible ambush setup." Lieutenant Vargas reported from the lead vehicle. His tone clipped over the static. Elias dismounted swiftly, Rex already straining at the leash, ears forward. The team fanned out, rifles at low ready, the heat wave distorting the horizon into shimmering veils. Rex pulled left, toward a cluster of boulders half-veiled by acacia scrub, his body going rigid mid-stride. Elias signaled the halt, heart pounding in the disciplined cadence of training. "Alert confirmed," he called, voice steady as the EOD swept in. But as the tech probed, a secondary threat unfolded. Private Lawson, on rear security with his Malinois Shadow, misread the dog's hesitation. Shadow had whined but not committed, a rare off day from the stress of the heat. Lawson advanced too far, boots crunching over loose shale, and triggered a tripwire none had scented. The blast was contained, a flashbang rigged to disorient, not kill, but shrapnel grazed Lawson's leg, and Shadow bolted into the scrub, leash snapped in the chaos. The private hit the ground cursing, blood seeping through his fatigues, while the dog vanished into the thorny brush. "Medic!" Vargas barked, the team converging. Elias secured the area with Rex, the dog's nose still working the air, but his mind raced to the underbrush. Shadow's panicked barks echoed faintly, then cut off, silenced by the terrain or worse. Lawson clutched his wound, face ashen under the dust mask. He just pulled. I couldn't hold him. The private's eyes met Elias's, a flicker of shame amid the pain. Sergeant Mills, nearby, muttered under his breath, "Told you those mutts glitch under fire." It was the same poison from training, now amplified in the field, where doubt could fracture a unit faster than enemy fire. Captain Reed arrived by helo extraction 20 minutes later, rotors whipping sand into stinging veils. The medevac lifted Lawson skyward, Shadow still missing, the search handed to a drone sweep. In the debrief tent that evening, the air hung heavy with the tang of iodine and tension. Reed paced the scarred plywood table, his tablet glowing with incident logs. Loss of asset. K9 and handler compromised. Kane, your team held the line, but this exposes cracks. Lawson's inexperience, Shadow's alert failure, and now we've got a loose dog in hostile territory. Elias stood at ease, Rex at his side, the dog's flank warm against his leg. "Sir, Shadow's trained for recall. If we extend the search—" Reed cut him off with a raised hand, eyes narrowing. "Resources are stretched. Hire says prioritize the op. That dog phases out anyway, same as yours." The words landed like a slap, the captain's gaze holding Elias's, testing. Mills shifted in the corner, his smirk barely concealed, the unit's eyes on them all. Protocol demanded acceptance, log the loss, reassign duties, move on. But Elias saw the injustice raw. Shadow, like Rex, wasn't expendable. Abandoning the search meant condemning a partner to the wilds, where thirst or predators would claim what war hadn't. As the meeting broke, Reed pulled Elias outside, the desert night cooling rapidly, stars pricking the velvet sky. The generator's hum provided cover for their words. "I know you're close to Rex," the captain said, voice low, almost human beneath the rank. "But pushing back here, it marks you. Reassignment, maybe worse. Chain of command isn't a suggestion." Elias nodded, the weight settling deeper. Duty urged compliance, focus on the mission, let the system handle the fallout. Yet conscience burned. Rex's steady gaze from the shadows reminded him of the nights the dog had lain vigilant while Elias wrestled ghosts. If he defied now, quietly organizing a handler-led search at dawn, it could save Shadow, affirm the bonds that held the unit together. Or it could unravel everything, his career, the trust of the ranks, a ripple through the institution. That night, in the dim glow of his bunklight, Elias sketched a grid on a field notepad, the likely paths Shadow might take, water sources in the wadi. Rex curled at his feet, head lifting at the scratch of pencil, sensing the unrest. The decision crystallized in the silence. Obedience preserved order, but action honored the loyalty that defined them. By 0200, Elias slipped from the tent, rousing 2 trusted handlers. Quiet nods, no questions. They geared up under the moon's pale watch, Rex leading toward the defile. The test peaked not in explosion or evasion, but in this shadowed choice, defying the order's cold logic for the warmth of a brother's call. The search yielded Shadow by first light, the Malinois huddled in a crevice, dehydrated but alive, his fur matted with burrs. Elias's team returned him to base without fanfare, the dog limping but tail thumping weakly. Words spread through the handler's net, murmurs in the chow line, a subtle shift in Mills's glances. Reed's inquiry came swift, a formal log entry, unauthorized action, potential op risk. But in the captain's office, amid the scent of oiled leather and briefing binders, Reed's reprimand held an undercurrent of respect. "You bent protocol, Kane. Don't make it habit." Elias saluted, the line drawn, the moral fracture widening. Yet the defiance lingered, a quiet spark. Rex's retirement loomed closer with each patrol, the desert's vastness mirroring the chasm between duty and heart. Elias knew the ripples would extend beyond this op, back home, through the ranks, testing the system's capacity for more than survival. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The rotation dragged into its final weeks, the desert's grip unrelenting as the unit's patrols traced the border's fractured lines. Elias Kane moved through the routines with mechanical precision, his boots grinding against the compacted sand, the weight of his pack a familiar anchor. Rex stayed close, the German shepherd's pads toughened by the terrain, though Elias noted the subtle hitch in his gait after long hauls, the first quiet sign of the years catching up. The air hummed with the constant drone of drones overhead, their shadows fleeting across the wadis, while the scent of creosote bush mingled with the sharper tang of gun cleaner from the armory tents. Captain Reed's briefings grew terser, the maps on the command table marked with red lines denoting cleared sectors. "We're winding down," he announced one dawn, the lantern's glow etching hollows under his eyes. "Extraction in 10 days. K9 assets report to vet services on touchdown. Full evaluations." The words hung in the canvas confines, the flaps stirring in a hot breeze that carried the distant bleat of goats from nomadic herds. Handlers exchanged glances, the undercurrent of the Shadow incident still fresh. Lawson's recovery in the field hospital, the Malinois reassigned to light duty, and Elias's unauthorized search logged as a procedural deviation in the unit's after-action report. Mills had kept his distance since, his barbs silenced by the quiet solidarity among the dog teams. Elias focused on the task, leading Rex through a final certification sweep along a supply corridor. The dog quartered the berm methodically, nostrils flaring at the layered scents of diesel residue and buried relics from prior conflicts. Elias's hand rested light on the leash, feeling the subtle tension in Rex's shoulders, the same vigilance that had pulled them through the ambush scare weeks prior. In the quiet stretches between alerts, Elias's mind turned to the retirement forms tucked in his gear. Standard procedure. A handover to the military's working dog adoption program. But the stats he'd overheard from Diaz painted a grim picture. Only half of phased-out K9s found placements. The rest cycled through shelters, their bonds severed by bureaucracy. Rex deserved better than a cage in some Virginia warehouse, waiting for a civilian handler who might never come. That afternoon, as the convoy idled during a resupply halt, Lieutenant Vargas approached Elias near the water point. The lieutenant's uniform was dust-caked, his rifle slung low, but his posture held the crispness of command. "Kane, walk with me." They moved to the edge of the staging area, Rex trailing at heel, the sun beating down in waves that distorted the horizon. Vargas stopped by a cluster of boulders, kicking at a loose stone. "Reed mentioned your initiative with Shadow. Risky, but it held the team together. Handlers are talking about loyalty, about not leaving assets behind." His eyes flicked to Rex, then back. "Brass is watching. One more bend in protocol, and it could end your run here." Elias nodded, the canteen in his hand sweating against his palm. "Understood, sir. Just doing right by the unit." Vargas clapped his shoulder, the gesture brief, then returned to the vehicles. The exchange lingered, a ripple in the chain's rigid flow. Back at base that evening, as the team scrubbed gear under the mess tent's awnings, the clatter of buckets and low murmur of debriefs filling the air, Elias overheard Mills in the chow line. "Kane's playing hero with the mutts. Wait till retirement hits. Rex goes surplus, just like the rest." The words were low, but they carried, drawing nods from a few younger privates. Elias ignored it, filling Rex's bowl with kibble laced with electrolytes, the dog's tail thumping steadily against the packed earth. The breaking point came 2 days before extraction, during a routine perimeter check at dusk. The sun bled orange across the sky, casting long shadows from the razor wire as Elias and Rex patrolled the outer fence. The air cooled fractionally, carrying the faint howl of wind through the scrub. Rex froze suddenly, not at a scent, but in a stumble, his front leg buckling on uneven ground, a low whine escaping as he limped back. Elias knelt swiftly, running hands along the limb. No break, but a strain from the cumulative miles, the desert's toll on an aging frame. "Easy, boy," he murmured, the dog's breath warm against his wrist, eyes locking in that unspoken trust. By the time they reached the vet tent, Diaz was waiting, his exam light harsh under the generator's buzz. "Torn ligament mild. Rest him out. No more patrols." The corporal's voice was matter-of-fact, but his glance at the retirement file spoke volumes. With the op ending, "This seals it. He'll need full eval stateside, but mobility's declining. Program might classify him non-deployable." Elias stood silent as Diaz bandaged the leg, Rex lying still, tail giving a weak wag. Outside, the base stirred with pre-extraction prep, crates being loaded, rotors whirring in test runs. Duty dictated compliance. Ship Rex with the unit, let the vets decide his fate. But the image of the dog in a holding pen, isolated from the pack that had been his world, twisted like a knife. That night, Elias lay on his cot, the tent's nylon walls whispering in the wind. Rex curled close, despite the injury, his warmth a steady presence. The decision formed in the dark. Upon return, he'd forgo the official channels, no auctions, no forms. Instead, a quiet drive into the North Carolina scrublands, land Maria's family owned, wild and unmarked, where he could bury Rex with full honors if the end came swift, or let him fade in peace. It was defiance, a handler's code over protocol, but the cost loomed. Potential court-martial for mishandling assets, whispers through the ranks that could stall promotions, fracture the trust in his leadership. Dawn brought the extraction convoy, Humvees lined under camouflage nets, the air thick with exhaust and anticipation. Elias crated Rex last, the dog's bandaged leg careful as he settled, eyes meeting Elias's through the bars. Captain Reed oversaw the loadout, his clipboard a final authority. "Solid op, Kane. Get him home, both of you." The captain's tone held no probe, but Elias felt the weight of the unspoken, the shadow search still in the logs, this quiet resolve adding another layer. As the wheels lifted sand, the desert falling away below, Elias stared at the receding badlands, the moral chasm bridged only by action. The chain of command would demand answers, but loyalty, raw and unyielding, demanded more. The ripples had begun, destined to echo beyond the war's end, through careers and quiet graves. The C-130's wheels kissed the tarmac at Pope Field with a shudder that echoed through the hold, the engines winding down to a low whine as the ramp groaned open. Elias Kane uncrated Rex under the floodlights, the North Carolina night air a balm after the desert's furnace, cool, laced with pine and the faint ozone of an approaching storm. The dog's bandaged leg held steady as he stepped out, nose lifting to the familiar sense of home base. Wet asphalt, distant kennel hay, the metallic tang of chain-link fences. Elias clipped the leash, his hand lingering on Rex's collar, the worn leather a talisman against the bureaucracy waiting in the vet offices. Debriefs followed in the ops center, fluorescent hum underscoring Captain Reed's final words over steaming coffee. "Clean rotation, Kane, but that deviation with Shadow, it's in the file. Hires reviewing K9 protocols. Efficiencies mean tough calls." Elias saluted, posture rigid, the weight of the unspoken decision pressing like an unseen pack. Protocol demanded immediate turnover, Rex to the adoption pipeline, a vet stamp, and fade to civilian limbo. But as Elias walked the perimeter trail that night, Rex limping softly beside him, the stars sharp overhead, He chose the path of conscience. No forms, no auctions. Maria waited at the family plot. Acres of scrub and oak in the Carolina lowlands, wild enough for peace. The drive south came at dawn. Humvee traded for Maria's old truck. Rex in the bed under a tarp, head raised to the wind whipping through the pines. Elias pulled over once at a rest stop where the air smelled of rain-soaked earth to check the bandage. Rex's eyes met his, steady, the whine low in his throat, a mirror of the ache building in Elias's chest. "We're done running, boy," he said, voice rough over the idling engine. Back home, the vet, civilian now, a quiet favor from Diaz, confirmed the ligament's tear, the cumulative toll of sand and strain. Prognosis, months, maybe a year if managed. But the military's shadow loomed. Inquiries would come if Rex vanished from records. Elias buried the official story in paperwork slight, marked as adopted pending, then a quiet resignation from active handler duty, citing family needs. The unit buzzed with rumors. Mills's barbs in the barracks, Lawson's grateful nod during a chance encounter at the PX. But Elias focused on the land, fencing a shaded run by the creek where Rex could roam, his patrols now lazy quarters of squirrels and wind-stirred leaves. Maria brought bowls of fresh water, her hand brushing Elias's in the evenings, the silence between them heavy with understanding. Rex's fur greyed at the muzzle, his alerts reduced to playful chuffs at birds, but the bond held, nights on the porch, Elias's fingers tracing the collar's etchings, memories of Wadis and warnings unspoken. The end came swift, 6 months on, under a harvest moon that silvered the oaks. Rex weakened overnight, the leg giving way fully, breath shallow in the kennel Elias had built from scrap lumber. Elias knelt in the straw, the scent of damp fur and earth rising, Rex's head heavy on his knee. No clinic, no tubes, just a final walk to the hillock overlooking the creek where wild grasses whispered in the breeze. Elias dug by hand, the soil cool and yielding, muscles burning in the disciplined rhythm of labor. He lowered Rex in, collar intact, a folded flag from their last deployment tucked beside. "Rest easy, partner," he murmured, the dirt pattering soft as the grave closed. Maria stood watch from the porch, her silhouette steady against the lantern light. Years passed in the quiet cadence of civilian life. Elias took a security post at a local firm, his uniform swapped for khakis. But the handler's vigilance lingered, in the way he scanned crowds, the stories he shared at VFW meetings about bonds unbroken. The incident rippled outward. Reed, promoted to battalion, cited the shadow search in a white paper on canine retention, arguing for expanded adoption reforms. Lawson's team, reformed under stricter training, adopted shadow outright. The Malinois, a fixture in base demos. Elias mentored quietly, visiting the unit, speaking to green handlers about loyalty's cost, his words measured, no lectures, just the weight of experience. Mills transferred out, his cynicism unchecked, but the unit shifted. Fewer phase-outs, more placements, the chain bending toward compassion without breaking. It was a decade later, in the summer heat of 2035, when the collar resurfaced. Elias was at the plot, tending the marker, a simple stone etched with Rex's service number, when a ranger's truck pulled up the gravel drive. The officer, young with a starched uniform, held out an evidence bag, the collar leather cracked but tags gleaming, unearthed by a flash flood in a nearby wash. "Found by a kid hiking the state park border," the ranger said, voice respectful. He turned it in, said it looked like a hero's tag, traced the serial to old military records. The boy, 10 years old, wide-eyed and dust-streaked, stood beside him, clutching a sketchpad with a drawing of the find. Collar half buried in red clay, a dog's ghost in the lines. "It was under a rock, like it was waiting," the kid said, his words tumbling out in the porch shade. Elias knelt, the air thick with cicada hum and creek murmur, taking the bag. The etchings caught the light, Rex's name faded but true. "You did right bringing it back," Elias replied. His hand steady on the boy's shoulder, a salute in the gesture. Word spread from there, the Rangers report. A local news clip on lost legacies reaching Reed, now a colonel, who forwarded it up channels. The story sparked a review. Archived K9 honors formalized, a fund for retired handlers' memorials. Elias became the quiet symbol, invited to ceremonies, his testimony shaping policy, the defiance of one grave echoing in reforms that honored the unseen. The boy visited once more, sketching Rex from Elias's tales, the bond renewed across generations. In the end, the collar rested on the mantle, a relic of loyalty's quiet victory, reminding all that true chain of command bends for the heart it protects. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of He Buried His K9 After the War. Years later, a lost boy found the collar in the desert. See you in the next one.